Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our Vantage Point training today right here on our live YouTube channel. So excited for all of you to be joining us for a session certainly filled with a lot of twists and turns as we see the market conditions and ever-changing sentiment of the market. So important to make sure that everyone understands that as we dive into any training today, it's of course going to be education, but I'm excited to dive into some very important topics today, especially with respect to momentum and how momentum can impact the market conditions and help you identify entry and exit points, as well as help you better manage positions. So all things kind of AI trading related right here on our Vantage Point channel. So glad to have you all with us. If I could just get a very quick kind of hand raise or just kind of check in to let me know if you've ever heard of Vantage Point before, maybe if this is your first time seeing Vantage Point. I just like to know who's on the other side, of this session to make sure that we are covering topics and material that's going to be relevant for everyone, whether you're already a Vantage Point user or maybe this is the first time you're seeing it and you're using a different platform. We do strive to make sure that this education is based for everyone, and momentum is certainly a critical element for any trade style and strategy. So that's what we're going to be diving into today. So I'm going to go ahead and get our Vantage Point software on the screen. So we're going to go ahead and just jump on over there. So glad to have everyone in the session today. Now, I will keep a close eye on the chat as we go through our session today. Always like to make sure that everybody knows. And oh, hang on one second. Sorry guys, getting a little bit of feedback there, but I think we've got that all sorted out. So yeah, just let me know in the chat and let me know, if this is, something that's helpful for you during this session today. So, hey, Mark, thanks. So glad to have you here. So many of you others that have chatted in. Shane, thanks so much. All right. So again, we're going to go ahead and get started here in our Vantage Point session. And of course, keep in mind, we're going to go through ticker symbols a little bit later in the session too. But I do want to highlight kind of just the importance of momentum today and also give you kind of tips and tricks and tactics that you can hopefully take to your own trading strategy and implement and, give yourself an edge as well. But using the momentum here is really a critical element, again, at this time of the markets. So really during any time, to be honest with you. So let's go ahead and start here. I am going to just simplify our chart a little bit. I do have verified support and resistance levels on my chart. You could see those were the red and green boxes that were initially on the screen. For our starting kind of point, let's go ahead and remove those and make sure everybody knows how to read the Vantage Point charts. So I'm just going to do a very quick tutorial here. If you're not familiar with Vantage Point, I think it's going to be eye-opening and certainly very easy to use for you. That's what we strive to do here at Vantage Point. So if you notice, any time that you have a blue line crossing over the black line, this is going to give you a bullish expectation of the upcoming trend. Now I say upcoming trend because Vantage Point is a predictive software. It uses artificial intelligence and neural networks to look behind the scenes at the markets that are actually impacting and driving things like 3M. And we might have time to take a look at some of those a little bit later. But what you really need to know as a trader and in our session today to understand the Vantage Point software is that when a green trend is identified, that's going to equate to a potentially bullish expectation. And of course, we never rely on just one indication. And that's why I think momentum is so important as well, because it allows us to get another level, another layer of understanding to each trend. But before we get to momentum, let's talk about this green and red banner that runs across the screen. Now, this is called the Neural Index. That's a very fancy name for a very fancy indicator, but again, very easy to use. So the neural index is price expectation. If you want to know whether you expect price to go up for the next 2 days or maybe down for the next 2 days, then the neural index is your indicator. And again, this looks out that 2 days into the future. So we can see that at this point of our crossover here, this neural index was green. So it's confirming that green or bullish trending expectation. So we would, of course, now have two pieces of confirmation that are in agreement, telling us, hey, expect some bullishness here. So we have a lot more confidence moving along down through our analysis. And so the next piece is actually where we are going to tie in some momentum. So if we take a look down here a little bit further, I'm just going to pull my screen up. You can see Vantage Point. It's very easy to manipulate too. If you take a look, grab my pen, there we go. If we take a look at our preliminary momentum indicators. Now, we at Vantage Point call these predictive differences, but you can imagine these as the strength of the trend, or, in some cases, momentum as well. We want to know, is there incoming strength into this trend? Basically, do we have strength backing this up to propel us forward into those momentous moves? And so as we can see this wave of initial momentum coming in from those strength indicators, those predictive differences, we have now 3 additional indicators giving us nice confidence that we do have the strength to really continue to push higher within this trend. So here we have timing, here we have price with the neural index, and then of course we do have the predictive differences, those strength and momentum indicators down here at the bottom. Now, where would we be without price action too? So current price action, or better yet, expected price action for that next trade day. So I'm going to actually just circle this candle right here. Now I know it's not looking back at our point here in time where we were looking back in June, but this would be our 4th point of confirmation where we're actually looking for a green predictive trade candle. Now that green predictive trade candle, yes, I said predictive trade candle, is going to give you the predicted high and predicted low for the next trade day. And if those values are expected to be higher, meaning a higher high and a higher low, we would expect price to rise. And you can see that you do have a bullish predictive trade candle on today's indication. So you know what, let's just take a look at our current day scenario that we're seeing right here. So we can see on 8/6. Now, keep in mind today's 8/7, right? You're like, well, the trade day is just ending. So how do we have this information ahead of time? Well, Vantage Point users have this information at 6:30 p.m. the night before, okay? So if we have this information at 6:30 p.m. the night before, you can then better gauge and better assess for your strategic moves going forward for the next trade day. So basically you can plan and prepare versus just trying to react to whatever the market does. So a plan and a strategy in the markets is definitely better than just that emotional reaction that sometimes takes place when the markets do their fun and wild and crazy things that they do, right? Regardless of the situation, regardless of the fundamentals, the data here tells us what to expect the next day. So if we take a look again, current day, let's see, do we have those 4 points of confirmation lining up? And we can actually see that we have a bullish crossover here with the blue line coming up. And you could even switch this over to a shorter term crossover. Can I get just kind of a raise of hands or a me in the chat if you would prefer an earlier entry? An earlier entry sometimes is a little bit riskier, but there can be a lot of reward there. That's what some traders prefer. Other traders are a slightly more conservative on their entries as well. So again, want to just make sure I know who we have in the room, but let me know in the chat so I can certainly bring some of those up as well. So let me show you that earlier entry. Vantage Point, of course, can switch into different time frames as well. And you can see we actually have a bullish or an upward moving trend indication here on 8/5. So that indication would have given you the confidence, hopefully, to execute, possibly based on that expected move. And then, of course, confirming with your neural index. You can see we have a bullish price action. So if you expect the trend to go up, you expect price to go up, and you have momentum shifting to the upside as well. And let's not forget our predictive trade candle also giving you the confirmation to potentially enter into, again, this is completely up to you. I'm not here to give you any trading advice. Of course, I'm not a licensed advisor, but I do know the technical analysis incredibly well. And more than that, I know the predictive artificial intelligence and technical analysis here in VantagePoint very, very well. So as our head trainer, I teach all of our, or most of our VantagePoint users, anyone who wants to take advantage of our wonderful education and resources, how to use the software. And we actually have a whole team that does that to help you identify areas of the market that could be shifting. Now, of course, this is just the kind of preliminary checkpoints that traders can use to identify trends, whether it's on that shorter term expectation, whether you're looking at more conservative, so more of a medium term type swing trader, if you will. VantagePoint was designed for the swing trader. So when it comes to finding those swings in the market, in those moves that are backed by momentum, we can see that happening here. And if you like trades to the downside, the momentum shifting to the downside is also incredibly important to understand, whether you're exiting out of a current position or maybe entering into a new one. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the different types of momentum trades, right? So when it comes to trading momentum, and I'm just going to jump on over to the cues because momentum can have a large impact on trader sentiment as well, and just the overall markets. And that's because the markets are connected. They are, moving and pushing and pulling and driving the price action in the day-to-day markets, whether it's ETFs and, groupings of stocks like what we see here on the cues, those major indices, or whether it's an impact on the individual stocks as well. And so understanding these kind of web of connections behind the scenes is really difficult for a lot of traders. And that's why, many traders are starting to use artificial intelligence and again, those neural networks to better understand those market correlations, those market connections. Well, VantagePoint actually does that for you on a level that's just, unheard of. And so what you can see here is, in fact, if we go into the market details, and I'm going to do this on the cues just so you guys can see, the kind of web of connections that is actually impacting the cues itself. So we can see different sectors. So here's kind of the parent market that we're looking at here. And then behind the scenes, we have, just 31 different markets that are actually pushing and pulling and driving the cues price action, because we know that these markets move together, whether it be a Forex pair, right, like the Euro USD, or maybe even gold, right? The gold sector does move a lot of things in the markets and has different correlations to other areas of the market, or again, whether it be an individual stock like Valero Energy, right? So you can see different stocks, different ETFs, different indices, and even Forex pairs that will show up in this intermarket analysis. And it's this that the artificial intelligence is actually doing behind the scenes. It's this information that it's using to generate those predictive forecasts that we see on the chart. So I'm going to go ahead and just close out of that so everybody can see the cues. So we were talking about momentum today and how to navigate through the market conditions and identify really those major turning points using momentum, and specifically the predictive momentum that we can gather from using the artificial intelligence and those intermarket analysis that we just saw on the screen together. And so using the cues, you can see we had, I can even back this chart up a little bit further, even go back further and further and further. We could even put this on a little bit more conservative time frame, meaning the triple cross. So this is going to be all three predictive moving averages together on the same screen at the same time. So you can actually see the integrity of the trend. I'll just back this out actually to a 6-month chart. We'll just make it easy for all of us, right? And when it comes to the triple cross, the reason I bring up this more conservative view is because this triple cross has what we call the T-cross long value right here. And this T-cross long value is actually an 18-day predictive exponential moving average. So this really acts, this line, this T-cross long line, can act as a very dynamic level of support or resistance, specifically for, reversions to the mean, right? So, that's the triple cross has many different, uses, I guess I should say, in trading, not only trend integrity, but also points where, price might revert back to before continuing. And so as we can see on the cues here, we do have a downtrend that's really started. And the triple cross here is actually confirming that we are continuing to the downside and would expect a larger reversal out of this. All right. It's no longer just sort of a short-term pullback, which is a type of momentum trade, that pullback or reversion to the mean. And so when can we better understand when we're at that tipping point, or whether or not price is just kind of resting before it resets? And that's a question I get on a lot of my one-on-one trainings with, a lot of our users is, how do I know the difference between a pullback and a reversal? And a great way to better understand that is by identifying the momentum within that trend. So not only the trend integrity or the current trend, which is part of momentum, but also where momentum is shifting at that point in time. And there are a lot of momentum indicators you can use for that as well. Is anybody familiar? Tell me in the chat, what momentum indicators are you guys using in your trading? Again, whether it's on VantagePoint or another platform, tell me what momentum indicators you are using in your trades, in your analysis, in your entry timing, right? So as we can see, again, crossover to the downside, this trend remains red. Now, here's where I'm going to point out where we hit support, okay? Now, when we hit a level of support or resistance, we can have really one of two possibilities. Technically 3, right? We could go sideways for a little while, which would be consolidation. That's, unless you're an options trader or like spreads, typically, you're going to avoid those scenarios, like as I mentioned, unless you like those sort of delta neutral type strategies. But really identifying the potential for a breakout, which would mean a break through that support or that bounce off of the support level, is really that critical fork in the road for a lot of traders. And this is where that sort of, dilemma comes in, like, should I stay? Should I go? What do I do here? But using momentum, you can better understand what strategy would work best in each case scenario. So again, this is where we have a trend to the downside. If you like to short the market, you probably loved this time, right? Or you weren't scared. You were just like, okay, let me switch strategies, because momentum allows you to really diversify your strategy. And so when you hit a level of support, if we see momentum continuing, guys, and here I'm just using your basic momentum indicators down here, we can see momentum is starting to shift. It's no longer coming down like what we see, but it's actually started to shift back to the upside at support. So then what would be the more likely scenario here? We're typically going to see price move in the direction of momentum. So at a support level, a bounce would be much more likely because we have that shift in momentum occurring. All right. Now, this would be that reversion back to the mean. So if you're a shorter term swing trader, or you like to kind of take advantage of these shorter term moves, even in a down market, you can find uptrends. They might just be shorter term, that reversion type trade. Well, then you can use that mean that price is reverting to as a potential profit target. So notice here, we have that T-cross long level I mentioned previously, right? So we actually have a bounce off of a support level with momentum shifting and a profit target. Now, I don't know about you, but that's kind of the recipe of a start to any trade strategy, is identifying an entry point, management, and then where is your exit point. Now, everyone's going to look at that a little bit differently, right? But having indicators that can help guide you to that, so you're not just trying to guess, right? You can actually use the indicators themselves, that predictive artificial intelligence to identify those targets, certainly makes those decisions much easier because you're able to make an informed decision, not just guessing. All right, so let's take a look at that point, right, where we see the price action coming back up to hit that mean. What happens then? Look at the shift in momentum that we see. It starts coming back down, and even we see that neural index turn red as well. So if price action is expected to come down and your momentum shifting bearishly, where do we think this is going to go? And it goes that way very quickly. So if you wait 2 or 3 days, well, gosh, you've just about given back all of your profit, if not at a loss. So avoid those scenarios. If you're looking for quick, shorter term moves, you can use that triple cross along with momentum to search for those reversion type trends. Now, if you're looking for stronger momentum, like right here, where we see a full shift and reversal, we would want that momentum to continue. And this is position management, guys. But again, tackling that momentum here, I'm just going to pull this up so we can see we in fact have bullish momentum right here. So if you notice, we have a bullish, we've got, there we go. There's my pen, I think. Yep. Okay. So gotta love it when technology works and doesn't work. It's always trial and error here, right? But gotta love going live. So as we see, we have that bounce off of support and shifting momentum, because I'm just putting my crosshairs here, that light blue dotted line, so you guys can see exactly where I'm referencing. So if you take a look at that momentum shifting here, your neural index is now green, and we can see also too on our shorter term, I'm going to switch back over to that medium term cross, or even that shorter term cross if you like those earlier entries. Boom, you have a crossover right there. So green, green, bullish. Not sure how much more confirmation you want, but if you did want more confirmation there of a stronger potential trend, then that's when you could add in some additional momentum indicators. Of course, those are the short term, medium term, and long term predictive differences that you see down at the bottom of your screen. But you could also add on things like a traditional RSI. A lot of traders will use MACD. Those are probably the two that I find are, kind of most common. But I will say, you can also look at things like stochastics and TSI as well. Is anyone using any of these momentum indicators that you might see on the screen? I just want to see who's familiar with them. Let me know in the chat so that way I can make sure. Again, we cover those. If you have questions on the indicators too, please let me know. It's more education for you guys today. So let's take a look at that RSI. I'm going to just go ahead and enter RSI on the chart. Now, of course, you can put these side by side. I'll zoom in just a little closer so you guys can see this. And in fact, you know what? Let's do this so everybody can see. I'm just going to move that RSI. It's a simple click and drag, guys. Super easy to navigate here. And back that out to a little bit further back so we know exactly where we're referencing here. That sort of 423 turnaround that we saw, that kind of rebound in the markets here, right? We all know what happened there. So if you now take into account the fresh crossover, right? And of course, then we have the neural index, predictive differences, but now take a look at additional momentum and see that little blue dot. All right, everyone, that little blue dot next to an indicator means that there's predictive data already built into this indicator. So we're not looking at just a traditional RSI. You're actually looking at kind of a supercharged RSI, or relative strength index. The relative strength index is a shorter term, more sensitive momentum indicator. So great for identifying earlier shifts in the trend, and even earlier entry points as well when paired with timing indicators, price indicators, and just good confirmation. So when we see all of that lined up along with bullish momentum, gosh, you've got a lot of confidence there, then this trend is really starting to generate some movement to the upside. And that's important because confidence in making your trade decisions helps you to navigate through how to make those strategic decisions, right? How much are you going to put into this position, right? What's your position sizing? Are you putting on stops? Are you protecting yourself? What's your risk management strategy? There's a lot of questions that traders ask themselves even before entering into a position. And knowing what's happening behind the scenes with that momentum, sort of under the water, if you will, before the wave starts to surge, then allows you to make those decisions more strategically and more confidently. And a confident trader is certainly a better trader. So as we see, again, crossover here, confirmation, we could even add on that MACD. Now, MACD does tend to be a little bit more conservative. So we can add on MACD. And again, I'm just gonna, mine are set to automatically jump over to that other side, but you can set up your own software however you prefer. A lot of customization here. But we can see that at this crossover here, now for those of you who are familiar with MACD, you are looking for the moving average, that blue line, to cross the black line. Do you think we like blue lines crossing black lines at VantagePoint? We definitely do, right? So with a MACD, you can see the blue line actually started to shift back here, right? And so we already started to see that shift in momentum ahead of time. And then, of course, getting full confirmation here when we have both in alignment. So short-term and long-term momentum lining up to give us confidence that this is more, or likely more, than just a shorter-term reversion. But we may have enough strength to actually blow through some resistance, resulting in a potential breakout trend, which is another type of momentum trade. So if we take a look here at our resistance level, so our resistance, again, I'm just walking through this trend here. We'll do this up to current day. So if you take a look, we're at resistance here. Resistance is going to be denoted by this arrow and, of course, the red dotted lines. And so when price hits resistance, well, it's almost like hitting a block wall. Sometimes it could be a block wall. Sometimes it could be just a little bit of speed bump, right? So it depends on how price reacts. So you need to know what's the likelihood of busting through this barrier for price. And that's really what resistance is think of it like a barrier for price. And it has a lot of downward pressure on price. And that's why you see the arrows are actually showing the direction of that pressure, whereas support tends to push things up. All right, so you can see the red arrows as price approaches that is pushing down, which is why we see that little bit of pause in price action here. Well, how do we know we're likely to continue trending higher through that resistance, or whether we're gonna revert back down, right? Again, that reversion, that pullback, short-term strength versus longer-term strength. Well, take a look at momentum, guys. At resistance, what is your momentum telling you? And so if you are, if you like breakout trends, which I can tell you, most traders love breakout trends, right? Because they tend to move very rapidly and, you know, a lot of gain in a little bit of time. So if you want to talk about doing more with less, right? A breakout trend is a great opportunity, especially for options traders too, because there's so much leverage in the markets in that short period of time that the market moves very rapidly. Do we have anyone in here who trades breakout trends? I'd love to just kind of get a sense of where you guys are at. So type that in the chat. But as you can see, the possibility of either breaking through resistance or bouncing off of it really falls to momentum and identifying that shift, identifying whether or not we are expecting to see that momentum continue to propel us through up to the next resistance. And so as we see another resistance level right here, price pauses. Does that mean that the trend is over? No, not necessarily, right? This is where we see that sort of consolidation. This is kind of the nail-biting moment that everybody tends to start looking around and saying, oh my gosh, what's going to happen here? Is the market going to shift? Are we looking for, shifts to the downside? Should we be concerned here when we're at resistance? And you might not know it's resistance, but you can sort of sense that sentiment shift more towards a fear mentality when we get into this area of consolidation, especially when we get up towards extreme areas where wheat price has been going on for, it seems like forever, right? Really, we know it's just since April, but it seems like it's been a long time, right? I feel like 2025 has just flown straight by, right? So if you take a look at these periods where we hit momentum and you look down to see what your where we've hit these periods of resistance, you look down to see what your momentum indicators are telling you. Is that blue line still above the black? It is. Is your RSI still trending up? And the answer is yes. So you then have the confidence here, and again, confirmed renewed momentum here within the predictive differences for that breakout after resistance. Who wants to identify that nice breakout? And again, we're talking about quicker moves here when it comes to a breakout trend. I've already shown you a couple of scenarios where you can look for longer term trends, but let's just take a quick profit calc. So in 9 days, you're at 6.5, maybe even upwards towards 7%. Of course, just playing that a little bit more conservative here, depending upon your entry and your exit. But when we see shifting momentum back to the downside, this is when you want to be a little bit more cautious. And we actually have that happening a few days prior. I'll put the crosshairs right there for you guys so you can see it for yourselves. If we see right here, we have momentum at a max the following day, things start to shift. Look at those predictive differences coming on down. At this point, you know that you're at higher risk. MACD actually stands for moving average, convergence, and divergence. So divergence is going to be strengthening, convergence is going to be weakening, and so we see the MACD starting to converge here as well, telling us that there's some weakness possibly in this trend. How strong will that weakness be? Well, I guess I would look at momentum when it reverted back to that mean, right? So again, let's jump on down here, go to views, put that triple cross back on so we can see where does price in fact revert back to when we look at that shift to the downside. And when we see that shift in momentum at that T-cross long level, acting as a very dynamic level of support or resistance. And in fact, we actually establish a verified support level right here. So reverting back to that mean and then jumping back on up, you can see your RSI and your shorter term predictive differences coming back up as well to give us strength to continue within this trend. So lots of great different reversions, happening here as well. So even if we take into account, several different areas of this market trend, like let's just take into account here, like 611, right, where we had some major consolidation, even that pullback, where I know from my standpoint and from a training standpoint, there were a lot of traders asking, like, how do we know whether this is going to be a huge reversion or reversal rather than just the reversion back to the mean? So basically a larger correction, right? Are we going to have a breakout to the downside, or are we going to continue? Again, that critical fork in the road. And a huge piece of that is that reversion to the mean. Look, we reverted right back down to that T-cross long. At that level, did we have renewed bullish strength? And we can see we actually saw that happening on 624. Again, pulling that up because you can see that your predictive differences start to trend back up. Again, you had moving RSI, for those of you, again, who are familiar with RSI. If we jump down to that yellow line and bounce off of it, that's a really strong signal that would give you the potential for continuation of the trend. So again, renewed bullish strength is the way that I like to look at it. So do we have renewed bullish strength at that reversion point? And also too, interestingly enough, I want everybody to kind of keep this in mind, this 6/11 date to 6/23, right? Where we had this really volatile time in the market where we had a bit of a pullback. And so if we talk about that intermarket connection, right, those markets that are correlating and driving each other, I'm actually just going to pull Nvidia here, and we can just put these side by side if we want to, so we can look at them simultaneously. I'm just going to push this back to a 3-month so we can see and make these look the same way. Let's put the triple cross on here so you guys can see, and we'll just pull this up slightly here. Boom, there we go. All right. So if you take note, right, where we had again that 611 to 623, see how we had that pull back here, right? I'll circle it right here, all right? Well, what happens with Nvidia here, right? Grab my pen, there we go. So where's our 611, right? It actually started right here around 610, 6.9 here, where we started to see some weakness. We hit that resistance, right? Are we hitting resistance on the Qs? Yeah, absolutely, right? We already knew that we were coming up to a barrier. And so did we have enough momentum to push through that barrier, or are we just going to be banging our head against this resistance for a little bit of time before gaining enough strength to break through, right? You hit something enough times, you're eventually gonna break through, or you're gonna get tired and say forget it, right? And in that case we would have that, you know, shift to the downside. But again, here we hit that resistance, but look what happens to your momentum to signify the breakout after that resistance level. Guys, right here, look at your momentum indicators. These are your predictive differences. You can again pair that up with your RSI that I mentioned on the Qs when it hit that 50 and bounced back up. Well, we see that happening here on Nvidia as well, right? Where we have that shifting momentum to allow you to see these ahead of time and better plan and prepare for that renewed bullish strength. Maybe you took some profit out here, right? But maybe you're looking to scale into the position. Or maybe you missed out on this initial run on Nvidia and you're like, man, you had that FOMO, right? Where you're just like, I missed it. Like, this is the only opportunity in the market, which we know is not true. Of course, I'm being a little facetious there because there's always opportunities in the market. And this just proves that, where when you see sort of that pullback or that pause in price, if you can identify the next big break, then you put yourself in a position for, you know, some potentially really big wins, looking for those breakouts as well. And that breakout is really what just propelled Nvidia to keep continuing and soaring. And that's, you know, what happened here recently was a reversion back to that mean. And I'm just going to close out of the Qs here, guys, so we can focus on Nvidia. I'll just pull this back. There we go. So yes, you can compare charts too, by the way. But focusing on Nvidia here, let's take a look, because we see that we had price action really far away. So after a breakout, right, you can see you broke through resistance here. After a breakout, price is only going to go so far. A breakout's kind of like a sprint. You can only go so far for so fast, you know, for so long. So in that case, when are we going to tire out? When is price going to tire out? And that's when we oftentimes see those big drops. So in a momentum breakout like that, you typically do want to have a stronger risk management strategy in place as well. So maybe that means tighter stops. Maybe that means smaller positions for you, something to better manage that capital or the potential for pullback or reversion, because they go hand in hand, right? Momentum, it's like a pendulum, swings one way, then swings back the other, and that can happen very rapidly. So you do want to make sure that when it comes to momentum, that you're thinking about several different things. Timing, of course, the momentum, but then also the risk management side of that as well, to protect those profits. You don't want to put in all that effort for, you know, just to give it all back. And so if we can see here, we had renewed momentum coming in right here after that bounce off of the mean. So we'll just walk through this here on Nvidia, right? So we had that reversion and then renewed momentum bouncing off. We had potential for a breakout here, right? Price action still staying strong, momentum still shifting to the upside. We could even put on our shorter term RSI. We could even add our stochastics here as well. And we'll just zoom on in a little closer for everybody so you guys can see exactly what we're looking at here. But you can see as we bounced off and then come back up, look at your RSI. It's shifting to the upside even at that resistance. Right here on 724, we are at resistance. The likelihood of us breaking through that resistance depends on really two key factors, momentum being overwhelmingly one of them, and the other would be volume too. You want to make sure you have enough activity there. We did a session on volume recently, so definitely go check that out if you haven't. But volume and momentum together can really give you a lot of confidence to make a decision on the likelihood of a breakout. And so as we hit resistance, we then see that breakout happen, and we knew that that was likely to occur because we have the predictive momentum here. Look, so if you notice, your predictive stochastics is already shifted to the upside, and RSI is moving up as well. So, I mean, I couldn't make this any easier, right? We're just looking for confirmation. When things are in agreement, the trends seem to go much smoother, right? It's kind of like life. When things are in agreement, things run much smoother. When there's conflict, better be careful, right? Things could blow up at any moment. And so when we start to see conflict right here, if you notice, stochastics, this is again protection to the downside too. If you're in an uptrend, you're gonna buy and then you want to sell higher, or if you're reverting back to the mean, you may even take a short position as well. And so you can see stochastics here is already shifted to the downside before that really big down day. So again, this is where when price gets too far overextended, it can drop rapidly. This is why you want to have that risk management strategy in play as well, especially if you were looking for those breakouts. And part of that risk management is carefully monitoring that momentum. And so you can see when things start to come in disagreement, again, RSI was still coming up here, flattening out the next day. Stochastics has already said, hang on, something's shifting here, right? And so pairing these indicators together like this is what helps to give you more confidence as well, because sometimes RSI will signal before, sometimes stochastics will signal before, and when they line up, that's where you have that really strong move. And so when they're in disagreement, you know that you should be definitely much more cautious, again, kind of risk on scenario where you're protecting profits if you're at a point of profit taking as well. And then of course, then that reversion back to the mean. Okay. And then what happens? Look at RSI in this case signals first. So we have that bounce off of that support level, which also happens to coincide with that T cross long as well. Gotta love it when indicators overlap. These are looking at two very, very different calculations, two very different data points, but when they overlap, we know that they're stronger. Okay, again, when they're in agreement, things are typically stronger. And so you can see here momentum shifting back to the upside. Even in the predictive differences, you can see that shift back to the upside, and stochastics follow suit for that continuation, and we see that continuation of the trend as well with Nvidia. So let me ask, are there any, I know we have probably about 15 minutes left. Are there any particular ticker symbols that you guys want to review today? Let me know in the chat if you can. All right, I'm just taking a look at our chat that we have going on here. Perfect. Okay, yes, go ahead and just type in your ticker symbols now if you can. That would be greatly appreciated, and then we'll go ahead and talk through some of those. Now, momentum can also help you to identify the areas of the market that are also moving and shifting as well. You got it. All right. Wow. A lot of them coming in now. So much appreciated. We'll get those pulled up. But I did want to just take a moment to just share, the importance of looking at market sectors as well. We already looked at the Qs. We know that's kind of an area of the market, but breaking that on down further where we can see potential breakouts as well. So when we see areas of consolidation like this, momentum can often help us figure out when that breakout is to occur. And it's important to understand that, when you see things moving back and forth, there are, again, shorter term moves that you can take advantage of to the upside or to the downside. So if you look at momentum to help you understand those swings in the market, you can identify shorter term positions. Now, if you like to avoid consolidation, then you are probably looking for stronger shifts in momentum. And identifying those ahead of time can be really important to selecting the right opportunity for your particular strategy. So, we could take a look at several of these here, but let's go ahead and type in some ticker symbols so we can take a look at those. So let's go OKLO, ASLO. Doesn't look like we forecast for that. Of course, anything that we have in Vantage Point is going to be forecasted at a minimum accuracy of 70% with up to 87.4% accuracy. So with those predictive forecasts, you definitely have an advantage there. So Bank of America, you got it. Tom, that's funny. OKLO. I've gotcha. Gotcha covered, Tom. No worries. Oh, okay. Got it. Yes. Okay. That makes a lot more sense. We definitely have it. Here you go, Tom. This is perfect. All right. I tend to do a little, fat finger typing occasionally too, right? So that's all right. No worries here. We got you covered. So in fact, let's start with OKLO. So when it comes to OKLO, I tell you what, why don't you guys help me walk through this analysis here, because it's important to me that you guys understand how to use the software. Now, keep in mind, there are some additional indicators that you can add on to Vantage Point if you prefer. Mostly what we're looking at here is what comes in Vantage Point. Now, with the exception of support and resistance and this earnings indicator that you see right here. This earnings indicator is an optional add-on if you want, with the index flag, and then also, of course, the accuracy of Vantage Point forecasting those earnings ahead of time. So I just want to point that out, because I am going to note that we do have earnings coming up on OKLO, which oftentimes will be a catalyst to a breakout, guys, by the way. So we have bullish momentum. With earnings coming up, we'll oftentimes see a breakout trend just prior to. And so we can see that we actually have had that happen recently. So we've been in a bullish trend. So we've identified the trend. So the first thing with momentum that you need to really look at is, what is the current trend? Are we expected to continue in this trend, or are we reversing out of that trend? So let's do that first. So first step is to identify we are in a currently bullish trend. How do we know that? Easiest way to answer is that everything's green, right? We can see green here on our crossover, green here on the neural index, and then of course our predictive differences are continuing. Johan, yeah, absolutely. If we have time, and Garth, yes, absolutely. If we have time, thank you guys for those. I will do my best to get to them. So again, trend, currently bullish. What is the momentum now as we hit this resistance? Because we are right up against resistance here. And so it's important to understand, when we're up against resistance, what is the momentum telling us as well. And so if we put on things like our stochastics, again, there's additional indicators that you can choose to add. I'll start with the shorter term momentum indicators. And so we can see that shorter term, we do still have some bullish momentum here. All right. So still the expectation here with our shorter term momentum could be potentially bullish, right? Now, are we pretty far overextended in this trend after that previous breakout? We are. Right? So we'd be careful and cautious up against that resistance. And we typically want to see a break of that resistance level first. Now, you're going to be a bit more cautious because, again, I can't stress this enough, earnings is coming up as well. So you certainly want to be very cautious. If we take a look at that earnings, we're actually seeing a negative earnings PE ratio here. So that estimate being at negative 0.12 is not exactly a positive earnings estimate. So could that be affecting the volatility? Absolutely. Could that be affecting the momentum of the trend? Absolutely. So those are some key fundamentals that you also want to take into account. So should you be probably very cautious after we've seen this bounce off, right? We've already had that reversion, and now we're coming up and try to break that resistance with some not so great earnings and resistance right there. You probably want to be very cautious here. That's completely ultimately up to you, right? But if we fail to stay above that resistance, and I want to say, let's just take a look here. I'm gonna pull this up because we can also just hit that little search button and pull up an asset. So let's see. Okay, OKLO is at 79.32 today. So at 79.32, we did fall down. Did we revert back to that triple cross? And this is where you definitely want to have stop losses in place. Again, this is risk management strategy. If you broke through a resistance, you may have wanted to kind of put a stop using that support or resistance level. In this case, resistance. You can move stops up as you break those levels to help you protect profits along the way. Again, not telling you to do that, but just some different strategic components where you don't have to guess at a stop loss. Use key levels that price is likely to revert back to. So if you blow through them, you're stopped out, you've protected profits, or at least, gotten out with maybe a small loss instead of a large one. So with that failure to break that resistance level, we'd be very cautious there. We let's see, did not, of course, fall all the way back to that T-cross long level. But if we do, then we could potentially see another bounce unless momentum likely is to shift us continuing to the downside. So, I think earnings has obviously an impact on that as well coming up in the next couple of days. You certainly want to be cautious of that. So I think that covers OKLO. Let's go to Bank of America. You are welcome, Tom. Absolutely. Let's see where we're at. No, you know what? Let's just make this really simple on all of us. I am just going to right click, go to the properties of the chart, and I'm going to apply this chart properties to all of the charts that we have open, so that way when we go to Bank of America, we don't have to continually add. So momentum's key. So we're going to certainly take a look at that. So as we can see, and I'll even switch this back over to the medium term crossover so you can see that default cross view as well. We have some really nice swings here in the market with Bank of America. So with that, you may even, again, look for those shorter term crossovers where we do start to see that shift. Now, even before the crossover, and this is why momentum is so important when it comes to timing too, because momentum can be that precursor that says, whoa, 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 look out. All right. You need to manage risk here because things are starting to shift. And so knowing when things are coming ahead of time is kind of that like alarm bell that sounds ahead of time. I don't know if any of you live in Florida, but I live on a golf course. So whenever lightning is 5 miles away from my house, I hear the alarms on the golf course go off. And so I know that there's a storm coming. Well, wouldn't it be nice if you could see that storm is coming ahead of time when it comes to the trends in the market? And that's exactly what momentum provides. And so when we start to see that shift in momentum to the downside, look, all three of your momentum indicators are rolling over at this point before the big drop. So if you want to talk about protecting yourself from extreme downside risk, momentum is a crucial part of that because we can see that shifting momentum. Now, the predictive forecast does actually forecast a bit of weakness here in the predictive differences, right? These momentum indicators that we're looking at here are part of the VantagePoint software identifying those areas of weakness for you. But if you want to take a look at your stochastics, you can see that rollover of the stochastics as well. You can see that RSI has already peaked out at the top and starting to come back down. So protecting yourself from large drops like this, can mean the difference between a great day, a great week, a great month, a great year, right? So it all adds up and consistency is key. So helping you to identify those areas where you should be a little bit more cautious. So let's take a look at this recent one that's happened here and also the potential for, a bounce off of resistance moving up as well. Sorry, just trying to take a look. I've got some other ticker symbols that came in, so want to see if we can get to those too. But here we had that shift in momentum, right, where we jumped down, hit that support level, have a crossover after earnings here. So a little caution there. Always like to exercise caution around earnings because it is a little bit more volatile time. But if you know how to take advantage of that volatility, it can also be a very profitable time as well. So as we see that bounce off of support, did we have bullish momentum coming back into this, guys? You asked, and here you go. Here's your bullish momentum shifting to the upside, right? Protect yourself from that downside risk. What's the likelihood of breaking through that resistance level? I don't know. Let's take a look at our momentum indicators. Are they pushing up, or are they starting to roll over into that bearish shift, right? Risk management should be top of mind here, right? Possibly profit taking, tighter stops, whatever makes the most sense for your strategy. But you could also, if you, again, are not afraid of the downside, which could also be very profitable, that shifting momentum to the downside with nice confirmation. Again, this works the same way in reverse. Red crossover, red neural index, predictive differences trending down with a bearish predictive trade candle, and you've got a great opportunity to potentially short the market and make money to the downside. Now, if you were long in maybe Bank of America overall, then maybe you're hedging against this position with some shorter term moves as well, using those momentum indicators ahead of time. So not only profit protection, but also just different ways to take advantage of those swings in the market. So you're not just kind of on the emotional roller coaster. If you have a position in Bank of America that you plan on staying in for a while, doesn't mean that you have to, just sit back with your hands up and hope that, you're holding on for the ride. You can also strategically position yourself in more of a hedging state so you can take advantage of the downside as well. And of course, looking at momentum as we see that shift, here's your stochastics coming on down. Here's your RSI coming on down as well. So, all right, let's take a look at app. So we've got APP. All right, well, we've got our first piece is what type of trend are we in? We are in an established bullish trend. All right, so are we looking for momentum to continue, or are we looking for kind of waning or wavering momentum? And we do still have some bullish sentiment here from our predictive differences. Now, of course, we do have sort of rising RSI. Now, you do see RSI can be a little choppy too, right? So this is where in an established trend, you might switch over to a more conservative momentum indicator where we actually see that blue line on MACD has stayed above and bullish this entire time. Well, there you go, Joe. That's not a bad position to be in, right? So as you can see, we do see, and of course, confirm today. So as you can see, we've got our MACD staying bullish the entire time, helping you to navigate through some of the dips and the swings. Whereas your RSI and stochastics can look for those shorter term pullbacks or reversions to the mean. So different indicators are going to help you with different strategic components or different pieces of your trade strategy. Shorter term, more sensitive momentum indicators can be that early warning signal of a wave coming, right? And then how large is that wave? Well, that's where MACD and things like your true strength index can come in to play as well. So I promised I'd try to get some of these other ones up, but let's just take a look and see what we've got. We do have some potentially still positive bullish momentum here. This market, AppLovin, has been, kind of reverting back to the mean quite a bit on that triple cross. We can also go to the medium term. We can see it's still positive, so still continuing to come on up. Now, again, that reversion to the mean could also be a great opportunity to add to positions as well. If you see things coming on down and hitting that lower level, and then maybe continuing up from there, if you do see that positive bullish momentum, could give you the opportunity to even potentially add to positions on that pullback. Anyone here of the buy the dip type scenario? And that's exactly what we're referring to, is that reversion to the mean and then a bounce off of support, and that creates that dip as well. And of course, with bullish continuing momentum, especially that longer term momentum, app does have the potential to just continue up and break that resistance level. We've got RSI going up, stochastics going up short term, and then longer term you have MACD trending up as well. So nice confirmation there. Of course, you do have earnings. They aren't positive earnings, and that came out yesterday. So app had a nice move today, and momentum was continuing to trend up. Of course, caution just because of earnings in general, but yeah. So that's our analysis on app. Let's take a look. What was the next one that got put in? Of course, Micron. I know we're just about over time, but if you guys want to hang with me for a couple of extra minutes, we'll do Micron. And somebody asked for Lyft. Always just want to make sure that we get as many questions answered as possible. All right, so anything particular on Micron, or just looking to see the momentum here? Let's do it anyways, right? Let's make sure. I'm just gonna load from our default, so that way we have those momentum indicators already on here. We can evaluate this together. So again, bounce off of support, guys. Anytime we see a bounce off of support with renewed bullish momentum, we are likely in for at least a reversion to the mean. These are types of trades where you can kind of think of them as possibly shorter term expectation until they prove themselves otherwise. So what I mean by that is oftentimes you'll see stochastics, right, start to move prior to your more conservative momentum indicators like MACD. So same here, right? We don't have a fully bullish trend yet, but we do have an earlier indication. Earlier signals are often riskier signals, but as long as you go into them knowing that, then you can plan and prepare for that additional risk. Now, we don't have any resistance sort of anywhere in sight. So we would potentially say, okay, well, we do have a bullish crossover here. And yes, in fact, we do have a bullish crossover. I'll zoom in real close so you guys can see the blue line over the black line. Moving on up gives us that bullish crossover, bouncing off of that support level with momentum, those predictive differences coming into and in favor of that bullish crossover. Stochastics also giving us that bullish crossover, and in fact RSI continuing its trek up as well. So this would be kind of that shorter term expectation. Where could we be reverting back to? What level, guys? Hopefully you guessed it, a mean, right? So that would be then we could just jump on over to that triple cross, and this is where you can identify potential profit targets. So if you hit that potential profit target at the T-cross long level, what's our next sort of objective, if you will? What's our next checkpoint along the way to see if we are continuing to push further? And this is where that short term proves to have a little bit more strength. Then it would be that resistance level as well. So Micron was up at 111.87. Guys, and our T-cross long level was at 111.39. So price action, in fact, with Micron jumping up and closing above that T-cross long level. So if we can continue with that nice bullish momentum there, again, the next profit target potential could be that resistance level as well. So this is just great ways to use momentum in whatever strategy you're using. We looked at longer term momentum. We looked at momentum in a downtrend. We look at momentum for risk management. But either way, looking at those turning points, whether you consider as a trader a turning point to be very short term, or whether you're looking for major market sentiment turning points, momentum is that alarm bell prior to that big wave coming. So make sure that you're assessing momentum in your strategies, because it is such a critical component there. So glad to have all of you joining us for our session today. It's always so much fun to dive into the charts and really analyze what you guys want to see on these sessions. So I always encourage everyone to come prepared with maybe 1 or 2 charts. I do try to get to as many as I possibly can. I know we went a little over today, but thanks for hanging with me a little bit later this evening. And I certainly hope that everybody has a fantastic rest of the week and weekend ahead. So happy Friday tomorrow, and we'll see you guys on the next session.